Good day, everybody. I'm Raul Harris, Group Creative Director here at Ocean Technologies Group. And if I've done my job correctly, you'd have heard of us. But if not, perhaps you're familiar with one of the 7 brands that make up our group. Working really across 3 areas of operational enablement there: the learning solutions, fleet software as a service, and crew software as a service. But working really as one partner, one CEO, one executive, one team, with which to help our customers to meet the challenges that they face or we face together. And there's no doubt that we've been in an extremely challenging period. Don't need to remind anyone about the COVID-19 pandemic and the effect it's had on our key workers and on our shore-based teams. And my hat goes off to all of you that have been coping in this time with the constant improvisation that it's brought with us. And we know that there's some anxiety as well about whether those seafarers who've experienced that 13+ months unable to get back to their families, whether they will really want to return back to a life at sea. And this, of course, at a time when we already had some anxiety about officers, with the BIMCO ICS workforce report showing a shortage there. Shortfall of officers. Well, we may be just coming out of that crisis, but there's another one coming which will have far deeper reaching consequences. The climate change with the race to 2050 and is going to fall very heavily on our shoulders, because the world's ambitions for carbon reduction simply can't happen without a huge effort from the shipping community. And anyone who's paying attention to discussions in Glasgow COP26 summit will have heard the debate about new technologies and new fuels that will deliver the 4th propulsion revolution. And importantly, those 2050 targets are dependent on the 2030 targets, which means we have very little time with which to prepare our people with the knowledge and skills they need for the changes to come. And then this leads us on to the broader concerns of ESG, which is not just the sustainability agenda goes beyond the environmental concern, but towards health and safety, health and secure working environments for our workers, just treatment, welfare, of course, and providing work environments for which people can thrive and be happy. And of course, the G of ESG requiring higher than ever levels of governance that encourage sustainable decision-making through transparency and accountability in pretty much every area that we operate. And these aren't really optional. These will be increasingly core to decisions on investment and consequently the viability of our businesses. And then, of course, there's the old challenges that haven't gone away, all the things that have kept us busy and still very much demand our attention. So what's all this really going to mean for our maritime professionals? How will this impact the work that they do and the skills that they need? Well, we would argue, and I'm sure many of you would agree, that we need to look through at that 4th propulsion revolution through a different lens and consider the human revolution that will be required to power us to 2050 and beyond. So today I'm going to zoom into these human factors and consider how we can ensure that our people not only have the knowledge and skills that they need, but also how we can enable good decision making, encourage positive behavior, and achieve higher levels of performance in our teams. Now, we've seen a huge focus on human element again in our industry over the last 3 or 4 years, with OCIMF taking a particular lead, firstly identifying it as really the final frontier as far as risk reduction goes, and then expanding on that theme with a number of pieces of specific guidance. Now, the first game changer was the release of the joint Intertanko OCIMF Behavioural Competency Assessment and Verification, the BCAV document, which makes the case for soft behavioural competencies as being just as valuable as hard technical skills, and provides a framework and guidance for their evaluation. And the second important piece of guidance was the Human Factors Approach document that set out some additional detail. Firstly, the distinction from the use of the term human element to the broader term human factors that takes in not only human behaviour and decision making, but the additional factors such as workplace design, systems and processes that might influence those decisions, and in many cases may impede the human's ability to behave as desired. And it also lays out in that document 5 pillars that sort of underpin that philosophy. Leading and shaping the culture you want, so organizational conditions, leadership, listening to your people, etc. Then well-executed tasks and procedures, so designing tasks to reduce the possibility of error, controls and procedures, training, of course, and the idea of work as done versus work as imagined. And then well-designed equipment and controls, so human-centered design, impacts of automation, etc. Skills to respond to emerging situations, so situational awareness and recovery, how people respond, and learning before and after things go wrong. So the importance of lessons learned from incident investigation and near misses, of course, but also studying and learning about how work is performed to spot things that may indicate that an incident is on the way. And then these were further elaborated in the document Human Factors Management and Self-Assessment, which puts flesh on the bones of those pillars with KPIs that can be used to measure your performance against. This also paving the way to add this into TMSA element 14. Now, whilst I appreciate these are designed for the tanker trade, I think all sectors should pay attention, because it's my firm belief that as ESG and in particular new fuels come into play, all trades will find themselves pursuing that same agenda. And I think we can see that coming through in initiatives such as the dry BMS standard from Intercargo and RightShip. So what tools can we use to meet these standards? How can we get on top of these KPIs without overburdening our already overstretched teams at sea and on shore? Well, for me, the leading and shaping the culture you want pillar is first there for a reason, and that's that culture is really the place to start. Now, culture eats strategy for breakfast, an expression you will have heard, no doubt, reflecting, of course, that if your people aren't on board with your plans, you're going to struggle to deliver them. But it's also a phrase that resonates in an uncertain world in which plans are subject to change and tactical decision making is required. You also hear it said sometimes that culture is what people do when no one is looking, reflecting that values-based behaviours ensure that people do the right thing much more effectively than enforced rules do. So a strong culture underpinned by meaningful values enable decision making, which is absolutely essential when situations develop at pace and people need to improvise. But when it comes to communicating and fostering our culture, we have some unique challenges. We're operating with an international, culturally diverse workforce, working remotely and in teams which are frequently changing personnel, all of which is a barrier to communicating a consistent message and fostering a real feeling of belonging. In this environment, induction and familiarization training is absolutely essential to getting people started off on the right footing and all singing from the same hymn sheet. And then, of course, there are new initiatives and campaigns you'll want to run. So rapid responses to near misses and those indicators that you pick up in that learning before incidents piece. So the challenge then becomes how to quickly and affordably create and distribute that material that communicates your ideas out to your organization. And there are various tools you can use. Our response to that has been to build something directly into the platform. We call it rapid e-learning, which allows you to quickly convert things like PDFs and PowerPoints and videos and crunch those together into a piece of e-learning that you can very, very quickly get out to the fleet. So speed being the real advantage there, and economy. So setting your expectations, of course, is one thing, but cultures have to be lived, which means that we take those cultural values into our everyday work. And once again, I think we can see why we've seen a renewed interest in competency frameworks. And have a look at this quote from the BCAF document. So competency frameworks offer a structured approach to managing, appraising, and improving performance by reinforcing values and encouraging a common culture. Now, competency management systems are nothing new in our industry. We all know they're key to measuring improvement and for demonstrating that improvement, of course, to third parties. But I think the wider benefits of competency management systems to create a positive work culture are often overlooked. They are a really good way of facilitating transparent career progression, succession planning, and also create opportunities for mentoring, feedback, and interaction between team members. And I think that's why we're seeing people like Intertanko and OCIMF and IMEC all building out new competency frameworks. And many organizations are implementing competency management, some for their shore team as well, something that I think we're going to see more and more of. And many people are put off implementing a CMS with the perception that it will be burdensome for the crew. But if it's implemented digitally, it can take advantage of smart workflows and centralized data that can actually reduce much of that burden and allow the CMS to add value to much of what's already happening on board in a structured framework. So capturing informal, experiential learning that might otherwise go unnoticed. And when part of a learning management system, the CMS forms a bridge between the real world task and e-learning and assessment. So learning materials are not just training for the sake of training, but become part of a pathway to proficiency. If we want to focus on behavior, then we really need to give many more sort of opportunities to monitor how people behave in controlled circumstances. Coming back to the human factors pillars, and that one that was the skills to respond to emerging situations, the level 3 KPI specifies the company uses scenario-based exercises to assess the effectiveness of training for safety critical activities. So how can we get our content to work harder for us, leveraging more interactivity to move from knowledge to application of knowledge and giving us a better idea of how someone will respond to unforeseen scenarios? Well, here's a few examples. This one's from a first aid choose your own adventure piece we've made. So at key points in the scenario, we ask the learner to make decisions, and therefore you can see how they'll respond to some of those quick decisions that need to be made. This example, more complex one from an interactive mobile game in which the player works through collision avoidance scenarios. So they're utilizing available information from the various onboard systems, taking all those inputs in, and then making decisions as to the right thing to do. And of course, this starts to really blur the lines with simulation, something that's been a cornerstone in maritime training and assessment for many, many years. But of course, being able to run these simulations now in the cloud is a massive game changer, making simulation accessible, scalable, and affordable. And thanks to collaborative efforts such as our new partnership with Wärtsilä, we have the ability to manage and consume cloud simulation directly from our platform, giving us an opportunity to unify the data, make it more accessible, and really upping the ante in terms of what can be achieved in terms of ongoing competency development. And I say that because technology is now making it possible to create learning and assessment pathways that combine multiple resources globally. And as more and more of these virtual and real world tasks are captured as data, we're able to connect the dots and observe patterns and see the impact of our initiatives on performance metrics. And of course, one source of data that we absolutely cannot overlook is direct feedback from our people. Again, the human factors documentation is crystal clear on the need for feedback gathering, this from the example level 2 KPI. And I'm sure many of you are already using surveys. They're a great way of finding out how people feel about your initiatives, from removing organizational blind spots. But thought needs to be given as to how that data is generated and captured and then combined with the other data sources I mentioned so that we can truly learn from it. Now, bringing training and assessment data from multiple sources is an obvious no-brainer. But by overlaying other internal and external sets of data, we can develop an even richer picture of how our vessels and our people are performing. So things like fuel efficiency, longevity of parts, use of consumables, all of these have a human behavioural dimension. Analysing incidents, near misses, results of internal audits against them allows us to make correlations. And when benchmarking these against industry averages, we are able to see these patterns even more clearly. And then using data analysis and automating the analysis of these patterns through machine learning allows us to plan more effectively, recommend efficacious behaviours, and nudge people into the right direction via the everyday tools that they use. So let's have a little recap of those tools that we can use. So to begin with, I think the cornerstone is the LMS, but it needs to be thought of as much, much more than a learning locker, than an evolution of a box of DVDs. And it needs to be a place to communicate your values. It's a tool for building the right culture, unifying the shore and ship training initiatives with a consistent voice. And of course, being able to take that mobile to take training closer to the flow of work. Materials, we need materials that can help our people. Of course, all the usual SDCW and MARPOL, ICM, etc. material, but material also that explains human factors and importantly, how to assess them. And also the means to generate company specific material. So content that can champion your culture and respond to what's happening in your organization, as well as that higher level interactive content that enables you to test not only knowledge, but the application of knowledge, and then pave the way for much deeper assessments. We talked about competency management systems, a competency management system that you can make your own and that provides smart workflows that facilitate the process and encourage interaction on board and with our shore-based teams. A greater diversity of assessments, yes, technical knowledge assessments, but situational awareness, how people respond to situations, ability and personality profiling, communication really important, and language skills, of course, as well, all those things. The ability to capture feedback from people that matter, how they're feeling about our initiatives, how they're approaching the work they do, what they value, where they need support, all of that is really crucial. And then the ability to bring that data picture together and find the patterns and deliver the insight into how we're performing. And then lastly, we have to do it in such a way as to minimize the workload for our teams. So much more automation, smarter workflows that can minimize the administrative burden and leave our teams with more space and time for the things that really matter. So supporting one another, mentoring, shaping a positive culture in which people can work and thrive and perform. And these, I think, we believe at least, can help us on the way to delivering the human aspects of the propulsion revolution and helping us to meet those challenges that lay ahead. So thank you very much for listening.